Tommy. Hey there, Tommy. How you doing?
Hello. I'm doing well, I think. Thank you for asking.
Good. So, what do you want to talk about today there, Tommy?
Well, I was recommended to talk about the problem of evil, but if you are not interested, we can do something else.
Whatever you want.
Yeah, I was just I kind of like for you to lead off with what you want to talk about, maybe make your argument or something like that. Just trying to interact with you. So if you want to talk about the problem of evil, let's do it.
All right. Yeah. Okay. I do consider it to be the greatest challenge, personally, to the traditional Christian faith. But I do believe a traditional Christian view can be fully coherent in that sense. I do not think it disproves it. But there are different formulations. If you are interested in challenging from a specific angle the problem of evil, I would love to respond.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of you could kind of go with the older J.L. Mackie kind of version. I'm sure you're familiar or whatever. But I like to talk about this stuff. If somebody came back to me and they were like, I really want you to structure this out and like a syllogism or something, I'd be happy to do that. But given that, we have an audience and I think we can probably talk about this with natural language pretty well. I kind of run it different ways because I anticipate different, responses depending on what your view is. So I guess I would ask you, do you think that God is infallible with regards to his desires? If he desires the dankest ice cream of all time, then necessarily he's going to get that ice cream.
I believe ultimately, yes. Ultimately, nothing can triumph God's will, in eternity. That doesn't mean that there aren't things that happen against God's will temporarily.
Sure. Do you think that God desires that there be evil in the world?
No. It would be against his nature.
But presumably he wants people to have freedom, right? To be able to make that choice, like a moral significant freedom between good and evil, right? That's going to be something that you want to make sure you have, right? Sorry?
Yes. He allows the possibility of evil because of the freedom.
Great. Do you think it's possible for an agent to always choose the good? Right, they could face themselves with evil, but upon being faced with a good choice or a bad choice, they end up making the good choice, and then the next event they do that. So then, for all events, they end up doing the good choice. Do you think that that's possible?
I don't think it's impossible. In theory, it's possible.
Yeah. So if it's the case that God desires that there not be any evil. He's a being, presumably you think he's omnipotent, so he can instantiate any possible world, right?
Yeah, as long as it's not contradictory.
Yeah, and we've established that agents freely choosing the good always, even when faced with evil, doesn't host a contradiction. So now it seems kind of weird. We have certain propositions, and we could formalize this in a way. I mean, we could do this an infinite amount of ways. But it seems odd because you have a being that is infallible, can't fail with respect to its desires that there be no evil, but desires also that, humans ultimately make that choice, right, between good or evil. But then you have a being that can instantiate any possible world. So it seems that God just failed then from your view, because if God can instantiate any logically possible world, and by your own admission, a world where agents freely do the good always is a logically possible world, then the conclusion of that argument is just going to follow that God can instantiate a world where agents always freely choose the good and no evil, right? So it just seems like that's going to be a problem. Do you track what I'm saying so far?
I understand, but that's the nature of freedom. If God forced us to always have chosen good from the beginning, then we would just
No. So you're introducing new language. Hold on, I have to cut you off. You're introducing new language. Notice that in if you go back and listen to the recording, I never once said force. I was actually very clear to make sure that it's morally significant freedom.
Yes, but
So there's no force here.
Then there would be a contradiction because you're saying there is no force, but we couldn't have chosen evil.
Look, but okay, I'm going to pass this to John because I want to hog the whole time, but I want to ask you this before I pass this off. Like, presumably you're a sinner, right?
Yes.
As a Christian, you're a sinner. Okay, the last time that you sinned, you could have probably done the good, right? And rather than sin, free?
Yeah, it was possible.
How about the time before that?
Every time it was in theory.
Every time, yeah, exactly. We can skip we can pass it to John quicker by not going through each one. So for each one of those, and presumably for all of those, I mean, we got to be careful not to have some quantifier shift from like each to all. But if it is the case that for all of the sins that you've ever committed in your life, you could have done the good, and that's possible, it's not clear to me that there is a contradiction, because you'd have to show some like logical derivation that like that's incompatible. But it seems like you concede that. And also, like, presumably you think God is a being that always does the good. And there's only two options there. Either he can't do evil and always does the good, or he can do evil but always ends up doing the good. So this view can't be contradictory, because then it would just show the properties that God inhibits to be contradictory and on a different level, right? So I'm not seeing what the contradiction is, one, and two, how this wouldn't just affect your view on another level where God is a being that can freely do the good always, right? There's no contradiction there. Why would it be the case for humans?
Yeah, so I would think there is a contradiction with the idea that God gives us the freedom to choose what to do, but makes it impossible for us to do otherwise. If it makes it impossible for us to do otherwise, then we are not free. It must be possible.
No, you are free. Upon that deliberation, no one's pulling your strings. You choose to do the good, right? God just instantiates the world where all the age, like he has a file cabinet, knows from the first, like, let's just imagine John's the only one that does a good thing and everybody else does horrible things, right? There's the first file after everybody does evil all the time. We have one person in one instance doing the good. And then the next file is John doing like 2 instances of good and everybody else doing evil. We do all these permutations until we get to the back end of the file. And the back end of that file is everybody freely chooses the good. We can't special plead and say that God pulling out one of those files determines my actions. If you already think God knowing what I'm going to do ahead of time doesn't determine what I do, then what's the difference between any one of those files he pulls out? Whether it be the one where we always choose evil, whether it be the one where some of us choose evil, like the world we're in now, and some choose good, or whether it be the one where everybody chooses good. We don't want to special plead, because for any one of those files God picks from, because he knows the contents of those files, you're either going to have to agree that God, knowing that ahead of time, determines what I do, right? Or you're going to have to say, no, that's not a problem. Divine foreknowledge and what God ends up doing is not a problem. But then in that case, you'll concede my point, which is that God could select any one of those permutations of freedom, any one of them, from John just doing one thing good to the end of everybody always doing good. And he wouldn't determine that action. He would just instantiate it by your own view.
Yeah, I do not believe that foreknowledge in God's case is deterministic.
Okay, great. So then you concede to me that divine foreknowledge doesn't determine humans' actions. Now, me and John probably definitely disagree with that. God knowing this ahead of time seems to directly have this tension between it. But let's grant you that. If you do that, you're giving me more ammo to play with, because now that since God's divine foreknowledge doesn't get in the way of our freedom, God's selecting the file where we always end up choosing the good is just him looking at the world where we always choose good and instantiating that world. He's not by your own lights, he's not determining it. So you're just conceding that he failed. He picked the worst file out of millions of different permutations.
No, he's not.
Sorry, John, I want to hog all this.
We're the ones making the choices.
Well, so if I can, hold on. typically I take the problem of evil in a different way, because I think that, what JMike is saying here is incredibly valid. Obviously, I usually like to think of it in terms of like unnecessary suffering or needless suffering. So these would be instances where we haven't necessarily made a choice for anything to cause like suffering and everything. So like thinking about bone cancer in kids, or like, anything of that sort. Those pesky little parasites that'll burrow into your eyes and like eat your face or something like that.
Like Loa worms or something like that.
Yeah. So like these are things that aren't necessarily stuff that we have chosen. It's just the way that nature operates, because nature is amoral. Nature does not care whether or not a living entity is suffering. So I guess the question as far as the problem of evil goes is, why does God allow that? If God is all good, then it kind of seems to me like God would create a world, or at least have a world, that doesn't necessarily include that kind of suffering. You could dance around all day with the kind of suffering that humans choose, kind of thing. But I feel like this one is a little bit harder to actually get around. So like, what's your answer for like nature causing like all this kind of suffering and all that kind of stuff?
That's a great question. Yes, it's important to make the distinction. The response would be the idea of the fall. This is not the world that God created.
So magic.
Broken by.
So magic. Let me get this straight. Your explanation is because a woman ate a fruit salad.
McRib woman.
A McRib woman ate a fruit salad. It magically cursed us. Hold on. It magically cursed us for all time, and therefore puts all human suffering on the shoulders of women. That's your answer?
No, I don't take the story of Adam and Eve literally.
Okay, well, you can't.
An allegory to explain the concept.
The fall isn't literal.
It's an allegory. Okay, you want to take it as an allegory. Perfectly fine. What the fuck is the allegory? How does this relate to like reality? I mean, if you don't think that a woman named Eve ate from a tree that she wasn't supposed to, and that cursed humankind, what the fuck actually happened? Like in reality, not just allegory, like what happened in reality? That's what we want to know.
Any act of rebellion, we do any because we were made free with the possibility of going against.
We're taking that as a literal thing.
When
you say rebellion,
between the first moment, yes, there was one. It's just those particulars are not literal. But there was.
And how is this not magical though? Like that, this is what I'm getting to. Like, how is this not magical? Because I keep getting back to this is like some magical stuff here, primarily because of the fact that when you consider what's being proposed here, you're saying that God got pissed off at somebody rebelling against him, which essentially is just disobeying what he's telling them to do. And so then he casts a magical incantation on all of humankind for all of history that then curses us to suffer at the hands of nature. Like that's what you're telling me right now.
Do you think that's justice?
No, it was not God. God did not break the world. It is defect. It's creation going against God's will breaks creation.
Is God a perfect creator?
Creation.
Is God a perfect creator? Like, is he like a perfect, like the best engineer in the world? Is he a very bigly good engineer?
I mean, not an engineer, but he's perfect.
Ooh.
He is perfect. So why did he create a universe or a world or whatever that can be broken? As an engineer myself, one of my tasks is to like do risk assessments and try to dummy proof my system to where it can't easily be broken. So like just a simple rebellion, like one time where a person looked up to the sky and flipped God off, apparently that was enough to break the entire universe. Is that what you're telling me?
That is what when we talk about the world being fallen or broken, that's the term that Christians use for the creature rebelling against creator. That's what it means. So it make it impossible for it to break.
But what does it mean to rebel? And in your eyes, when you say rebellion, what does that mean?
Yes, maybe it's a strong word. I only use it because it's a traditional world. It means going against God's will.
Right, exactly. So getting back to my original point, JMike, fact check me on, or well, not fact check me, but check me on this. Is this not exactly what I said? Somebody pissed God off because they didn't follow what he said, and so therefore God magically broke the world, broke humanity. Like there was something about it.
If you changed out what you said with what he added, John, the statement would remain true. It's not like he swapped out terms and replaced them and then made what you said false, right? It's the same thing, just with different words. It's really
exactly.
So, but like I'm a little weirded out because you're saying he's perfect, and then like John brings up this point that I really would like to ask you about. Do you think that like it's justice if I committed some horrible, like let's say I went and I burned down an elementary school or something terrible, right? And they put me on trial, and John comes up and goes, "Hey, I will take Mike's sentence for him." Right? I just put it all on me. Do you think that any justice occurred when I get off now and now John takes my sentence for me? Do you think that that's, I'm just trying to get, right now I'm just trying to gauge your sense of justice.
No.
Sorry, what was the answer?
Not fair. And I disagree with the view of Christ as penal substitution.
Well, I'm not even getting there yet. The point is that.
Sorry, I was assuming.
No, yeah. I'm just saying that, like, I'm just gauging what your kind of analysis of justice is and what's constitutive of things that are justice or things that are injustice. So presumably the thing that just occurred that I told you is it would be some type of injustice, right?
Yes, of course.
I should take Okay. How is that ostensibly different than me being born in, the 90s and having me put, basically I'm kind of, without even wanting to, I am now like, okay, I will take the punishment and the crime from something a McRib woman did, thousands and thousands of years ago. How is that ostensibly different? How is that a perfect being? And if a perfect being supplies justice, it seems incompatible. It seems like we have a new contradiction that a perfect being, right, couldn't have like these types of injustices, at least by your own lights. But that seems by your own lights to be an injustice, that if I am taking on a sentence that I never committed.
He must allow the possibility of injustice because it's entailed in freedom.
Well, that doesn't, so do you think you think God is perfectly just, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. But he doesn't do any injustices, right?
Right.
Okay, so what you just said was false then. It's not true. Look, you think God is free, right? He's not forced, he's free.
He is absolutely free, which is like an unlimited.
Okay, so fundamentally, we're not even talking about getting to humans yet. The like fundamental fabric of, the reality that you think is true, this God thing, right? You have him being free, right? Him being perfect and never having injustices. You told me that you couldn't have the freedom unless there were the injustices, but that's fundamentally and foundationally not true on your view, because the thing that's foundational in your view has no injustices, is perfect, and has freedom, and never does evil, by the way, which is me trying to get back to that other point in a vague sense that by your own lights, you don't need the ability to do evil or to do injustices to have freedom, because your view foundationally starts with something being perfect but having freedom, right? So you just introduce randomly down the line of creation that there has to be this thing for freedom. But foundationally, that's not the case, right? Do you see my point?
I understand. So I need to say two things. Firstly, I didn't say that it was necessary for evil to exist. I said it was necessary for the possibility of evil to exist.
But okay, let me stop. I know you want to go on, but was that inconsistent with what I told you from the outset, which was that agents will have the choice to choose evil or good, but they always end up choosing the good? That was consistent with what I said. I constructed that world in such a way that it was consistent.
Depend on God. That depends on our choice, not God's choice.
No, yes, it does depend on our choices, and God has the foreknowledge of all of the choices we could ever make. All he has to do is pick the file where everybody makes the right choice, right? You can't say that there's no freedom there.
He didn't pick.
So you think that you think before he creates, you're not an open theist. You're not an open theist. An open theist is somebody that thinks that the knowledge isn't knowable. So God is omniscient, but since the future isn't knowable, he can't know things in the future. You've never said that. You're not an open theist. You've admitted to me that God has divine foreknowledge about everything we'll do in all possible worlds, right? Why doesn't it? So him creating is selecting one of those possible worlds. I can't get past this with you. I'm gonna get stuck here with you if you can't hold on. I want you to recognize this point. He knows all of creaturely freedom actions in all possible worlds. Yes or no?
Yes, but not before us.
Great. So when he decides to create this world, he knew the actions the agents would freely take, right? He already knew that, right?
Not in the past.
Stop.
You're
saying. So are you an open theist now? God doesn't know the future. So you're contradicting yourself. Either he knows all the actions that we do in the future in all possible worlds, or he doesn't. You're just contradicting yourself. Are you?
Can I clarify?
Are you? Sorry.
Can I clarify?
Yes. Well, it's either one or the other. This is either God knows the future or he doesn't know the future of creaturely actions. That's a dichotomy.
So he knows everything, but you're situating him in time, saying that he knows things before they happen.
No, I'm asking if he knows what agents will do in all possible worlds. I didn't say anything about time. That might have time related, but I'm just asking you if he knows those propositions to be true. It shouldn't be hard. We shouldn't have to waste this much time on this.
I already said yes multiple times.
Okay, great. So then don't say something that sounds like you're going against that again, and I won't have to do this. Right? Don't gaslight me now, right? So when you have a view and you already think that God knows the future, he knows everything that everybody will do. Just imagine this world right now. He knows what I'm going to do at 8 p.m. I'm going to eat a ham sandwich. He knows that ahead of time, and he creates that world. What is ostensibly how is this not ostensibly the same thing as when he chooses the world where agents freely choose to do good? Notice what I said there. The world that freely chooses to do good. That should be no different than when he chooses this world, knowing that I'll do some good actions or some bad actions, right? We can't special plead and say that the one with all the good is somehow different than all the ones with the mixtures of them. That makes no sense, right? If he knows that ahead of time, he's going to know what will happen in the future, right?
He's not choosing, he's knowing. You're using the word choice, so I have to disagree.
Okay, so God doesn't choose to create then?
Not choosing the future.
So God, sans creation, God doesn't choose to create at some point, or some.
Doesn't choose our choices for us.
So God doesn't freely choose to create. I'm pretty sure as a theological doctrine that you probably hold to is that creation's a free gift.
Wait, hold on. Wouldn't that make your God limited?
Make him not free either.
No,
I'm assuming you believe in the triomni God, right?
Yes.
You believe in the triomni God, right?
Yes.
Okay, then it kind of seems like the God that you're advocating for is limited in his power if he can't, either choose a path or, control reality in a way where he gets the desired decision. Like just in any of those things, it kind of feels like he's very limited in his power. Then, huh?
I never said he couldn't. I said he doesn't, because that takes away our freedom.
How do you know he doesn't? How do you know he doesn't? How do you know that you're actually making your own decisions right now? What's to prevent God from sticking his fingers in your head, kind of like that woman from Deadpool and Wolverine, sticking it in your head and making you do things? Like, how do you know? And for that matter, how do you know that that's God and not Satan?
Yeah, it's just you're going into skeptical theism. If you're familiar with that.
Yeah, so we're talking about free will versus determinism.
But I'm just saying that you're making a lot of statements here that you can't actually back up with evidence, and it only causes more questions than it really gives answers. So,
I don't think there is a compelling argument for determinism being true, and in the absence of determinism, I have no reason to deny the freedom that at least seems to exist.
I'm sorry, but I don't understand how that can operate, and maybe JMike can explain it to me. Like under your whole worldview, because like if God knows the future and knows everything that is going to happen, then that kind of makes it deterministic in and of itself, doesn't it?
No, that's what I've been saying from the start. God's foreknowledge is not deterministic.
Yeah, but then okay, so I heard you on Talk Heathen, and we really have other callers, so I want you to call back because you have. I see several issues in your view because I listened back to part of your call on Talk Heathen, and you were talking about contingency and all that, and the problem that you're going to face though is how you actually carve out the modal space, how you actually get contingent facts. I don't think you can do this unless you invoke indeterminacy. So those possible worlds that you think are free to God, in my view, is going to require you embracing indeterminism, which means that God can't intend for some world and guarantee that world come about, right? That's going to be intentional collapse, and God can't be like omniscient and guarantee this world that he desires to create. So I want you to call back about the contingency stuff, because when you bring up this God isn't determined, there's these possible worlds, I think you're going to run into a different issue there, which is how do you carve out the modal space without invoking indeterminacy? And you said just a second ago you don't see any good argument for like determinism or anything like that. But one of the big problems you're going to face is that you need contrastive explanations across worlds. I don't know if you're familiar with this kind of like philosophical analysis, but you need things like contrastive explanations, because like if I have a world where I'm creating just like red Play-Doh, and then say like we imagine there's a world where blue could somehow be instantiated with all of the same red dye and all of that stuff, the only way you're going to get that possible world is if you're like, okay, well, randomly the output could just be blue because of some like quantum fluctuation or some chancy event. But otherwise, the antecedents are going to determine that outcome every single time, because you can't just change the outcome and then just go, yeah, I don't have a contrastive explanation for why that obtains, right? That's just giving no explanation. That'd be like me giving a theory of evolution going, oh, why does this phenotypic trait rise to fixation in a population over to, I don't actually need to give you an explanation for why that phenotypic trait rather than another phenotypic trait. That's not my problem, right? So I worry about your entire view on this, because you're going back into the contingency stuff, or you're going into like it's not determined by God, but either you're going to get intentional collapse or you're going to get God having to be forced to create the world that he creates. I don't think we can get into all the philosophical mumbo jumbo on that right now, but.
Well, I would add that you just described a lot of things about my supposed beliefs and made accusations. I would like to be able to respond.
Well, I didn't make an accusation. Right. I just said I think it's going to be very hard for you to carve out the modal space. This is an accusation I'd make against any theist that doesn't like understand. I have a different modal. So my view is an Aristotelian branching modality. I think you can only get contingent facts with if there's like a real true interpretation of quantum mechanics that's indeterministic. That's the only way you get contingent facts.
Right. So Tommy, I'm going to let you have the last word here, but we do need to move on to other callers. Okay. Tommy, did you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to let you have the last word, but we do have other callers to move on to, so we're gonna move on. But I'm going to let you have the last word. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for the lovely conversation. I do believe I can respond to the things you're pointing out. If we don't have time right now, I would love to talk at another time if it's possible, but I will just say that you are assuming a mechanistic view of how the world works, which leads you to those problems. I do not have a mechanistic view of the world where the world is a sequence of mechanical causes and effects, so I don't think your logic will follow. But we can
that's fine. When you call back, we'll talk about when you call back, we'll talk about the brute contingencies involved with libertarian free will, and I'll elucidate that point for you and why all you're saying when you invoke libertarian free will is a brute contingent fact. And anyway, that's fine.